Ever seen a shape that can basically explain the last 1,000 years of human history? Well, it kind of looks like a hockey stick. You've got this long, flat handle, which represents centuries of, well, not much changing. And then, boom, a sudden explosive blade shooting straight up. So, that's what we're going to do. We're going to dive into this one single shape and figure out what it tells us about how we got so prosperous, the massive inequality it created, and what it all means for the future of our planet.
Okay, so take a look at this. This is the story. For almost 1,000 years, from about the year 1000 all the way to the 1800s, living standards just didn't really move. And then, something happened. Something big, a dramatic, totally unprecedented takeoff. The central question for us is simple. What happened? I mean, really, what happened right there? Right, so before we get to that crazy explosion upwards, we gotta talk about the handle. The long, flat, kind of boring part of the stick. Because that's where humanity was stuck for, well, basically forever. It was a period defined by a really powerful economic trap. And the villain in this part of our story is something called the Malthusian trap. The basic idea is pretty simple. Think about it like this. A farmer gets a slightly better plow. Great. For a little while, they can produce more food, and their family is better off. But what happens next? Well, with more food, the population grows, more kids survive, and soon you've got more mouths to feed, and all that extra food gets spread thinner and thinner until everyone is right back where they started, just scraping by. It was this brutal cycle that kept humanity trapped for centuries. But here's the thing. This great escape wasn't a single event, not even close. It didn't happen for everyone at the same time or even in the same way. You look at the graph on the left for Britain, you see this slow takeoff starting way back around 1650. But then you look at China and India on the right. Whoa, it's a totally different story. For these huge economic powers, living standards actually went down during periods of colonial rule. Their hockey stick explosion? It came much, much later. The shape of history really depends on where you're standing.
Okay, so we've got this wild story of a great escape, but how do we actually measure it? I mean, how big was that jump, really? Well, that's where economists give us some pretty neat tools to put a number on that massive upward swing.
And the big one, the main tool in the toolbox, is gross domestic product. You've heard of it, right? GDP? Just think of it as the total price tag for every single thing a country produces and sells in a year. When we divide that huge number by the population, we get GDP per capita, and that gives us a pretty good idea of the average living standards.
So there's a simple way to do this called nominal GDP. You just add everything up using whatever the prices are today. It gives you the total money value of the economy. Simple, right? But, and this is a big but, there's a huge problem with just doing that.
Let's walk through a super simple example to see why. So in year 1, our little economy makes some phones and books. Total value, $54,000. In year 2, they make the exact same number of phones and books, but, and here's the key, the price of books doubles. Suddenly, the nominal GDP is $58,000. Looks like growth, right?
But that leads to the big question. If we aren't actually making any more stuff, has the economy really grown? Is the country actually better off just because prices went up? Yeah, exactly. Of course not. It doesn't feel like real growth, does it? So we need something better.
And that's where real GDP comes in to save the day. The genius of real GDP is that it totally strips out the effect of changing prices, what we call inflation. By using prices from just one base year for all the calculations, we can finally see if we're actually producing more stuff, not just paying more for the same old stuff.
Okay, so real GDP is perfect for looking at one country over time. Awesome. But what if you want to compare, say, the US and South Africa? You might think, easy, just use the exchange rate. Well, not so fast. Why? Because $100 in Johannesburg can buy you a very different amount of stuff than $100 in New York, especially for local things like a haircut. For a real comparison, we need to adjust for this.
And you know what? There's a really fun way to think about this. It's called the Big Mac Index. Seriously, a Big Mac is the same sandwich everywhere. But as you can see, your money buys you way more of them in some places than others. This idea, called purchasing power parity, or PPP, gives us a much more accurate burger-to-burger comparison of what people can actually afford all over the world.
Okay, so we figured out how to measure this incredible escape from stagnation. But, and you knew there was a but coming, this amazing story has a dark side, a really dark side. That upward blade of the hockey stick, it casts a very long, very dark shadow.
And here it is. Just look at this. On the left, our familiar hockey stick of prosperity. And on the right, the hockey stick of global CO2 emissions. They're basically twins, the exact same shape. The very engine that drove our economic growth, burning fossil fuels, was also pumping our atmosphere full of greenhouse gases. It's chilling.
And this isn't just some abstract number about gas in the atmosphere. No way. This next chart shows yet another hockey stick. This time it's global temperatures. The link is just undeniable. Our economic revolution has been fundamentally changing the climate of our entire planet.
But the shadows don't stop there. Because the incredible wealth that was created, it was not shared equally. This chart is amazing. It visualizes the world's income distribution like a city skyline. Over on the right, in the richer countries, just look at that back row. That's the richest 10%. Those income skyscrapers are literally towering over the tiny little buildings in the front row for the poorest 10%. The inequality is just staggering.
So, yeah, we can see the inequality. It's right there. But just like with GDP, we need tools to actually measure it precisely. How do you turn that whole skyline into a number we can work with?
So let's make it super simple. Imagine an economy with just 3 people. One person has 12 units of whatever, one has 4, and one has 2. We can see it's unequal, sure, but how unequal? How do we boil this picture down to a single number?
Okay, so the main tool for this is called the Gini coefficient. Now don't worry, the math can sound a little tricky, but the idea behind it is actually pretty simple. It's all about looking at the average difference between everyone in a group and boiling it down to one single number. For our little 3-person world, that number is 0.56.
So what the heck does 0.56 even mean? Well, think of it as a scale. On one end, you have 0. That's perfect equality. Everybody has the exact same amount. On the other end, you have 1. That's perfect inequality. One person has absolutely everything. So our 0.56 is somewhere in the middle. It's a powerful shorthand for how unequal a society is.
And if you're more of a visual person, check out the Lorenz curve. It's a brilliant way to see this stuff. That straight red line, that's utopia. It's a perfectly equal world where the bottom 20% of people have 20% of the money. But the real world? That's the blue line, sagging underneath. And that gap between the perfect line and the real line, that is inequality made visible.
And this is where it gets really cool. This isn't just academic. These tools show us how policy can literally change the shape of a society. Look at the Netherlands. The bottom curve, the one that sags the most, that's market income. It's what people earn from their jobs, and it's pretty unequal. But then, the government comes in with taxes and social programs. Now look at the top curve. That's disposable income, what people actually have left. See how government policy shrinks the gap and pulls the whole country closer to that line of equality? It's pretty amazing.
All right, so we've covered 1,000 years of history. We've seen this incredible escape, this explosion of wealth, but we've also seen the massive problems it created. Which brings us right here, to today, to our next big challenge.
You know, that first hockey stick, that was about escaping stagnation. That was the big project for the last few centuries. But our project, our generation's project, is totally different. It's about bending the curves. It's about keeping the prosperity, but solving the massive environmental and inequality problems that came with it. The shape of the next chapter of human history isn't written yet. The real question is, what will our hockey sticks look like? And how are we going to draw them?